What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. In this video, I'm going to give you the 10 teams that have the biggest boom or bust potential. So what does that mean? We're talking about teams that I think have a chance, if things go their way, to have a really special year this year. Maybe win their conference, maybe make the college football playoff, or at least be in that conversation. But these teams, in my opinion, also have a chance to be a bust. So teams that are considered one of the favorites in their conference have a chance to finish middle of the pack. These teams maybe are considered a playoff contender. They wind up barely making a bowl game, that type of thing. So we're talking about boom or bust potential. You know, you're not going to see Alabama or Oklahoma or Clemson in this video because their worst case scenario is still going to be like 10-2 or whatever. So that's not really a bust. A bust is we're talking about potential to lose 4, 5, 6 games, something like that. And these are in no particular order. I just put the 10 teams out there, and I'm going to show you the schedules for each team just to kind of give you a visual on how this could actually go down for them. So that schedule does play into this as well. But we start here with Texas A&M. Texas A&M, they've got potential for boom. They've got Alabama there on the schedule. That's going to be a tough game. Other than that, they're going to have a chance to beat everyone else that they play. They could be in that same position that they were in last year, where they just lose one game, don't go to the SEC championship, and they're right there in that playoff conversation. Or maybe they beat Alabama. Who knows? If Haynes King comes in there and he turns out to be the next Johnny Manziel and he's a superstar quarterback for them, they've got plenty of talent around him. Texas A&M has potential to be a playoff team this year. I'm not necessarily saying that they're going to be, but there's potential there if they, if everything goes their way. But on the flip side of that, you've got Alabama. You've got Ole Miss on the road. You've got LSU on the road. You got Auburn. There are some games in here where they could potentially lose. Now, I think 9-3 is probably about the worst case scenario for this team. So the bust for Texas A&M is not really that big, but it's there. I mean, 9-3 I think would be a bust. You go from being one spot away from the college football playoff to losing 3 games when you have expectations to be a top 5, 6, 7 team this year. And even 4 losses is possible if there was a big upset in there. How about Missouri right after playing Alabama? Arkansas is going to be tough this year. So there's potential for A&M to maybe even lose 4 games this year. So I think, yeah, boom or bust for Texas A&M. I think it's all about that quarterback spot. Haynes King, how good is he going to be? Next up, we've got Michigan. Michigan was a bust last year, that's for sure. You look at the schedule this year, and we'll start with the positive, the boom. Now, who can they not beat on this schedule? Maybe they can't beat Ohio State. But Ohio State, they're going to have a new quarterback. They've got some questions in the secondary. You never know, and that's a home game for them. Penn State, Indiana going to be really tough. Wisconsin going to be really tough. Even the boom for Michigan, I don't think it's a college football playoff. A 10-2 type year, maybe if things just go perfect for them. But you never know. I mean, they've got boom potential when you look at the quarterback spot and you look at J.J. McCarthy. What if he comes in there and he is the next Trevor Lawrence, the next Tua Tagovailoa, the next freshman to come in and be a superstar? He's got that kind of potential, big-time recruit. You never know. It could happen. And if he does live up to the hype and he does come in there right away, they could beat Washington. They could beat Wisconsin. Wisconsin's going to be really good, but that's a win they could get if they turn out to be better than we expect. You go down the list here. Yeah, they could get to maybe 10-2 this year, but on the flip side, if they don't get good quarterback play, the defense continues to drop off kind of like they did last year. There is potential for a huge bust here for Michigan. Washington could beat them. Wisconsin could beat them. Nebraska even could beat them. Indiana, Penn State, Ohio State. You could see how it could spiral out of control, and this team could miss out on a bowl game altogether. So I don't think they have as much boom potential as, say, a Texas A&M, but they have more bust potential, and you could see this team with just 4 or 5 wins potentially. Again, they were just 2-4 last year. Miami, another team that I think fits in here. Could they upset Alabama? Maybe, probably not, but maybe. But other than that game, can they win every other game on their schedule? Absolutely. I mean, North Carolina is going to be tough on the road, but other than that, they're going to be favored probably against everyone that they play. And you're looking at an experienced team coming back, Derek King back at quarterback. This is a team that I think could potentially finish the regular season at 11-1. Then they would have Clemson more than likely in the ACC championship, and obviously that's going to be tough. But still, an 11-1 year for Miami, I think Miami fans would take that, especially if that one loss is coming to Alabama. But there is bust potential as well. We've seen them in the past where they lose one game and it kind of carries over. They lose another game. So let's say they lose to Alabama, and then that carries over and they lose to App State or Michigan State. Those teams, Miami will be favored in those matchups, but those teams are both quality teams that could potentially pull off an upset. North Carolina, let's say they lose again this year like they lost last year. It's not close. They could slip up the next week against NC State, against Pitt. Something like that could happen. Florida State, they look like they could be a lot better this year. So another 3 or 4 loss season for Miami, that's, in my opinion, a bust with this schedule. And 4 losses, I think, probably would be the end of Manny Diaz at Miami. So again, potential to have a really good year, be in that playoff conversation. I'm not saying they would make the playoff, but they'd be in that conversation at the end of the regular season, or potential for a bust and possibly 4, maybe even 5 losses, something like that. Cincinnati. All right, here's another team that I think is really interesting. They're going to be good. Desmond Ridder back at quarterback, a lot of experience coming back. You look at the boom, and the boom for Cincinnati is if they can beat Indiana and Notre Dame, if they can win those 2 games in the non-conference and then beat everyone else that they play, which they're going to be favored against every team in the American, if they could pull that off, I know people still argue about this. I believe Cincinnati would be in the college football playoff unless we had 4 undefeated Power 5 teams or a one-loss SEC champ. There is a way where Cincinnati could get left out. But they have a really, really good shot at making the college football playoff if they run the table, because you're going to have Indiana and Notre Dame on the resume. Also, UCF is expected to be pretty good this year and winning the American Conference, the best of the group of 5 conferences. Yeah, Cincinnati, if they can pull it off and go undefeated, they could have a great year, a special year, and be in that playoff conversation. But at the same time, there is some bust potential because they could lose to Indiana and Notre Dame. And it wouldn't even be a big surprise. I don't know what the line is for those 2 games. They might be underdogs in both of those matchups. UCF's going to be good. You could lose that game. They could stumble around on this schedule and lose 3 or 4 games potentially. So it's a team that could go undefeated, be in the playoff conversation, or a team that could lose a couple of games to very good non-conference opponents, and then that carries over where they lose 3 or 4 games potentially. So boom or bust for Cincinnati. Next up, we've got Texas. Texas is really intriguing because the talent is there. They've recruited at a high level. They've got talent on the roster. Steve Sarkisian coming in. What are they going to be able to do in year 1? This is one that might have the biggest difference in the boom and the bust, because when you look at the schedule, Oklahoma is going to be that one game where you say, I don't know if Texas can win that game. Iowa State on the road, I don't know if Texas can win that game. Texas is going to be a more talented team if you look at recruiting ratings. And I know that doesn't tell the whole story, but they're going to be a more talented team than Iowa State. And Iowa State's going to be a better team in my opinion, but Texas can play with them. They could potentially win that game. Oklahoma's a rivalry. They can win that game. Yes, Oklahoma looks to be a better team, but you never know in that rivalry. So it's a team that could, if everything comes together for them and Steve Sarkisian gets everyone to buy in and the offense clicks and all of that, this is a team that could finish up there at 11-1 or something like that at the end of the year. But at the same time, you could lose to Louisiana and Arkansas, and that could happen. It wouldn't be a huge surprise. Those are quality teams. You lose those 2 games. You lose to Oklahoma and Iowa State, like I said. West Virginia on the road will be a tough matchup. Oklahoma, Texas Tech, TCU. You could see this thing really getting pretty rough for Texas. If they lose to Louisiana and Arkansas, it's a team that may not even make it to a bowl game, or they finish with 6 or 7 wins, and they do have that bust potential. So Texas is a team that is going to be really hard to predict this year. I think they have a lot of boom or bust potential. Up next is North Carolina. Everyone's talking about this team being the team that can maybe knock off Clemson. It's a team that's going to win the division. They're going to go to the ACC championship, and that is absolutely possible. And they could finish, they could go 12-0, honestly. When you look at the schedule, yes, Florida State, Miami, Notre Dame, that's a tough stretch there. Pitt's going to be tough on the road, but they're going to have a chance to beat everyone they play. They're not going to be big underdogs against anyone. So the boom is there. They could be 12-0 going into the ACC championship, or even 11-1. Again, a win away from a college football playoff berth. But look at the bust potential as well. You've got, like I said, Miami. They're going to be wanting revenge. You got Notre Dame on the road. Virginia Tech in that first game on the road First time we've seen full capacity stadiums in a long time. Florida State's a team that's gotten better this offseason. And just look at the past for North Carolina. They have a history now, the last couple of years, of losing close games and losing to teams that they really are better than. And if that happens again and you slip up and you lose to Pitt on the road or you lose to NC State on the road, something like that, you know, it could easily be another 4-loss year for North Carolina. So, yes, the potential is there for them to be a playoff contender, but also the potential is there for them to really not even be in that conversation by the time we get to November. Florida, another interesting team here. You look at the boom potential for them. Hey, look, they get Alabama at home, a young Alabama team, a lot of new faces on that team early in the year. Watch out. Could potentially see a big upset there in the swamp. They've got LSU on the road. They've got Georgia. So the schedule is really tough. I don't see really any way Florida's going to run the table. But if they could knock off Georgia and they could finish maybe with one loss, maybe to Alabama or LSU, they could be sitting there at 11-1, going to the SEC championship, playing for a spot in the college football playoff. The potential is there. You look at the roster, they've got talent. The defense should be improved. Emory Jones, we'll see what we're going to get from him, but he could potentially be a great quarterback. We really don't know. We haven't seen enough to write him off, and he's going to have that running threat. Dan Mullen, I think, is going to know how to use him. The offense will be good, and they could be a team that surprises everyone. But on the flip side, you could lose those 3 games. Alabama, LSU, Georgia. You could lose on the road at Missouri. I know Florida fans don't want to hear this, but you could lose to Kentucky. You could lose even to Florida State, a Florida State team that I think is going to be much improved this year. So there are several games on the schedule that could trip them up. They could finish with 4 or 5 losses. If the offense doesn't click with Emory Jones, could be a rough year for Florida. So potential, again, for them to have a great year or potentially a very disappointing year. Oregon is up next. I think it all comes down to Ohio State. That's where the boom or bust potential is for Oregon. If they can win that game, this team can go on to potentially make the college football playoff, and maybe even they lose somewhere else. But if they can beat Ohio State, this team has potential to do something special this year. They're going to be underdogs against Ohio State. I understand that, but it's not going to be like they can't win that game. They'll have a shot. On the flip side, though, you know, what if Anthony Brown at quarterback just doesn't get it going in the passing game? The offense is one-dimensional. They can't score, can't keep up with some of these top offenses. Yeah, the defense is talented, but they're not going to be good enough to beat everyone on the schedule. You could lose to Ohio State. Could lose to Washington on the road. That'll be a very tough game. Utah on the road. UCLA even on the road. So there's potential for Oregon to be a playoff contender or lose 3 or 4 games. A lot of boom or bust potential for them. Also with USC, I think it's kind of the same story. They have the big game against Notre Dame on the road. That's going to be their toughest game. If they don't have another really tough matchup here, Arizona State on the road will be tough. They play BYU in the non-conference, but this schedule is manageable, and that's a big reason why I think USC is on this list, at least on the boom side, because they could beat everyone on this schedule. USC could be in that playoff conversation at the end of the year if they're undefeated. Keaton Slovis is back at quarterback. The offense should be explosive. Defense, can they improve? That'll be a question for them there. But, yeah, USC, a dangerous team because of the schedule. They don't play Oregon. They don't play Washington either. And so, yeah, watch out for the Trojans. But while there's no, tough, really tough games on the schedule, there are a lot of games that could trip them up. Notre Dame's going to be tough. Utah is going to be tough. Arizona State's going to be tough. UCLA, just talked about them. I think they're going to be better this year. So there is potential to lose 3 or 4 games. We've seen it in the past from USC. We've seen them lose the teams that they should beat. And I don't see any reason why it wouldn't happen again this year, potentially. So USC, a team that could, just like Oregon, be in that playoff conversation or potentially lose 3 or 4 games. And now we have our last team. It's Indiana. I know people think that this team is being overrated. I disagree. I think they're going to be really good. I'm actually, they're bringing in more transfers. The more they bring in, the more I think Indiana could be a really dangerous team this year. Schedule's going to be tough, and that's what's going to hold them back, in my opinion, from really making that leap. But these are winnable games. Iowa on the road is going to be very tough, but it's a winnable game. Penn State, they beat them last year. Ohio State, they get them at home. Michigan, what are they going to be this year? So you're talking about potentially, also you have Cincinnati in there. That really just makes the schedule tough. but you're talking about potentially a 10-2 type year if things go their way. And I think a New Year's Six Bowl is a boom for Indiana. We're talking about Indiana here. I mean, that's a great year. But on the flip side, because of that schedule, you could lose to Iowa, Cincinnati, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, maybe even Maryland or Michigan State, one of those teams. It could be a 6-6 type year, 7-5 type year for Indiana. And then at the end of the season, everyone's going to be saying, look, you were wrong. You overrated this team. And maybe that'll happen. Or maybe it's just because of the schedule is going to be tough. But yeah, bust potential is there for Indiana. Boom potential is there as well. And for most of these teams, they're probably going to finish somewhere in the middle. So what do you guys think? Which team do you think has the biggest boom or bust potential? Who did I leave off that should be on this list? Give me your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports College Football Channel.